So, hello everyone. I would like to welcome you on our last talk today. I have here my dear friend Marsha. She's been actually one of my very favorite speakers at Agile Prague conference, where we still have it and we still can't travel. And last year, she actually made everyone on that stage dance. And that's pretty unique because most of our audience are from Czech Republic, Slovakia, maybe. We have Europeans as well, but the majority is still local. And that's something which we don't do usually. So she's really great. I have this high expectation today. Something like this will
Uh-oh.
happen. And forget it. And you should enjoy it. So, Marsha, you can start.
Thank you. Thank you, Zusi. Um, I am on the west coast of the United States, so I'm 9 hours behind you. So it is my morning. I've just had my tea. And for you, it's the end of the day. And I just want to say, I am so grateful for the way that the two of you keep creating a forum for us so that we can keep sharing our learning and we can come here and as inquirers. And I'm so grateful for it. I just want to say that again. I'd also like to present a little bit of my credentials, like how dare I speak about Agile, as I'm not an Agilist. I'm a business anthropologist. I am committed to many of the same principles, and that is why we align as in the way that we do. I was born at the end of World War II. Very different world than the world we're in right now. And essentially, I was handed the task of giving my parents a reason to be optimistic, which is rather a big task for a baby. The importance, though, to me, of the shift from task to how, or from task to interaction between the humans, that for me, that was radical. And I became angry at the age of 5, so about the age of Zusi and Sorab's daughter, just entering school. I was enraged that all of the adults around me were constantly suffering about work. Their suffering was always spoken of as though it were about work. And I said to myself, what is wrong with this picture? And that's really why I became a business anthropologist, because I was so angry at the dehumanizing that has taken place. What I want to promote today is something that is an additional task for you. It is, which I call dignity looping. So the focus from task to how puts us into the mechanism by which anything happens. And if you notice what we've done here is we've taken human examples, workplace examples, and we've mixed them with an example that has nothing to do with work and several examples from other living creatures. We have done that to focus on the fact that it is in these interactions that what we care about takes place. So just as John and Wendell were beginning to point to, the work is for them. What I want to point to is that when we look at an organization like this, we tend to think of the stakeholders. And what we're going to focus on today is not the stakeholders, but the interactions themselves. Putting the interactions at the focus. So rather than the task, we will look at how we interact. Some of our interactions are actually transactional. Sometimes there's money involved. But as you well know, most of the time when we talk about work, we're not talking about a transaction. We're talking about a different sort of exchange, a reflection, or an agreement, or a disagreement, a desire to help, some sort of celebrating. These are all the ways that we interact with each other. And in those interactions, each of us can create dignity. And when we do, we remove the damage of the Industrial Revolution. So I'm a coach. I am paid. I make my living as a facilitator and a coach. And I have been looking for the single point of failure since I was 5 years old. And I believe that the single point of failure is precisely the dignity loop that is closed when children realize that the work is for them, as John and Wendell pointed out in their video. When they realize that the work is for them, then they reclaim dignity. If the work is not for them, then we go right back to the Industrial Revolution, pair of hands, or consumer, which is what we all want to scram. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask you to share with each other a recent example of an interaction that you found rich. Only you get to decide what was rich for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into trios.
Marsha, you can get them into trios. You can get them to write something into the chat. So they can write that answer to the chat so people can see it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we could get into trios. Okay,
no.
We can't. All right, fine. Then I will ask you to reflect for a moment about a recent, very rich interaction in your life. And in perhaps one sentence, put in the chat what happened for you that made this interaction rich. It can be anything at all. It doesn't have to have anything to do with work. It can be any interaction, such as you with a neighbor or someone in the grocery store or the parking lot. So we're going to take a moment to do that. Let's say we'll take a moment, say 1 minute to reflect, and then another minute or two for people to write their reflections and for us to read each other's reflections. Okay, so take a moment, come into the chat and share with us what has been rich for you. I'm going to do it as well. So I am unable to see the responses. Where should I be looking?
You need to be looking into the event chat, but there are a few saying I was inspired and felt seen, new
Okay,
possibilities.
here we go. I
I
see
love it. You see it right now. Okay.
it. Now I see it. Thank you. All right. So we have a few examples here of the experience that several of us had. The last one, being part of a group of like-minded people makes challenging tasks seem small. That just happened to just land. But I am imagining that many of us resonate with each other in terms of the richness of our experience. And there's a way in which this is not surprising. And so my request to you is that you own the quality of these interactions. And there are many ways in which you can do that. Principally, however, the commitment is to focus on the quality of the interaction itself and not the task. For me, having been born at the end of World War II, this was a huge change. And I want to explain to you what I mean by that, because I think it's important that we really understand the cultural background into which we land. So when I was in school, a little older than Zusi and Soab's daughter, I was told that work is lifting a pound of water up 1 foot. That was work. And I was a little girl and I didn't really have much ability to think otherwise. And it took me many, many years to be able to work in an organization and have people see that what they could do if they paid attention to the interactions rather than the tasks was enormous. So I'm going to give you a little corporate example in which it was 1998 that I did this, a long time ago. People weren't really talking much about Agile then. And I made a group of executives promise me that they would ensure that no one in their group worked more than 35 hours a week, and that 4 of those 35 hours would be reflection in a place other than the workplace, and that the entire team would be responsible, that every single person had their 4-hour window for reflection outside of the workplace. At the time, that was a really big deal. They had to cover for each other and stuff. Because they did that, they were by far the most productive team in the entire organization. It was a Fortune 10 organization, so it was really, really visible. surprisingly, they were so surprised at what they were able to accomplish because they took exquisite care of each other. So I want you to consider the possibility that you could create rich exchanging everywhere, every time. You could just focus on rich exchanging. You could actually do that. And what that looks like, let me show you a metric. It looks like this. Suppose you just took a project, and this is an arbitrary project that I chose, and a particular day, which was March 10th. Actually, I think I was with Zusi that day in New York City. So this is an example. So we have a short online course, and we just looked at the percentage of rich exchanging in each of several areas. Now, what you can see here is this is clearly a liberating structure that we came up with so that you could use the principle of rich exchanging in an organizational context and actually have a metric that you could use. So this is how we do it, and we come up with an average. So on that day, I had 54% rich exchanging, which isn't bad at all. But you can see that there's a fair bit of room for improvement, even though this has been a practice of mine for many years. So I would like to now open the chat again. And this time, I would like you to share with us a time when you felt like you couldn't make a rich exchange happen and somebody else made it happen. So this is a common experience in the workplace. It's certainly a common experience I've had in my life where I felt like I was being depleted somehow by something that was going on. It was something I was becoming less than rather than more than. And somebody else intervened and turned it into a rich exchange. So if you can think of an example of that, you will be getting closer to the place where you could actually gain territory. So my request, I'm going to repeat the request. Share with us a moment when you couldn't create a rich exchange and someone else did, and just share us a little bit about what they did. Okay, 2 minutes. So this is interesting. We have fewer interventions here, and I don't find that hugely surprising because we tend not to think this way. As I'm reading your comments, I am feeling a sense of physiological relief in my own body that someone helped you. And this is very important because every interaction actually is physiological. So I want to point this out again to you. It's not so easy to navigate around here, but I want to show you something. That we actually elevate well-being when we help another person into a rich interaction from a depleting interaction. I want to show you again. As you look at these various ways of interacting, you can see that they're different physiologically. You know that if you were in this interaction, it would have a different cost and a different return on investment than this interaction. This one would have a specific cost and a specific ROI, as would this one, as would these. They are all physiological. So when you extend yourself to help someone else have a rich exchange, or if you allow someone else to help you have a rich exchange, you are actually dealing in physiology. That sense you have of being uplifted is not a deception. You actually are being uplifted. You are being vitalized by a rich exchange. They are actually pro-life. That's a different word, a different meaning. So pro-vitality. So I'm going to end by saying my journey was away from the task and toward the interaction itself. And I want to give you the gift of knowing that that is always physiological and that you can take care of people in an extraordinary way by just increasing your percentage of rich exchanging. And with that, I'm going to stop and ask Zusi to facilitate questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you. So if you have any questions, use the chat, and I guess I start. So you share with us the story when you were little. So I ask for a different story, like from a past year, what was the most, maybe past few years, it doesn't have to be last year, but past few years, what was the most inspirational client you have? I'm not interested in names. I'm more like interested about the story, if you can share.
Yes. So a leader of an organization that is stressed in a good way in this moment. So it's an organization of change agents. And as the pandemic has wrought its disruption, the organization of change agents is more challenged. And so the leader of this organization has a particular skill that she uses and that she would like to pass on to other people, because right now she's the only person who can do a particular action. And she wants other people to be able to do it. She doesn't know why other people can't do it. This is very common in my practice. It's very common. Someone who does something very well and wants everybody else to be able to do it and says, well, it's very simple. You just pick up the cup and then you pour the liquid into your mouth and then you swallow. What's the problem, right? Well, but it's not. It's not. So I watched her do this several times, and finally I was able to reflect back to her, this is what you are doing. And I gave her 3 steps. I said, the first thing you do before you even get into the situation is you get yourself into condition, into absolute certainty that you're going to fall in love with every single person in the meeting. And you do that before you get into the meeting. And then you enter the meeting and you go around and you have everybody speak and you visibly fall in love with something that each person says. And she went, oh my God, you're right. That's exactly, oh my God, you're right. And then she went off into, it's actually a spiritual practice. It's actually, So knowing how you are sourcing rich exchanging for other people is not always so easy. So you might need help having someone show you what you're doing that makes such a big difference to them, because you could just be Zusieing along. And Marsha could say, oh, Zusie, that is so amazing what you just did. And Zusie could say, well, I was just, what did I do? I was just making a note on my, and oh yes, but you see, you pointed me to something very important. So that's what happens in rich exchanging. This is an example, just a very recent, real one.
Yeah, good, thank you. I have a question here from Wim, and he says, like, what does a business anthropologist do? So can you explain a little bit that role, because it might be new to many of us?
Sure. Well, let me say, I invented the term in the 90s. And because people were asking me, how is it that you can see these invisible forces that we can't see? And so that's why the term. So, but in fact, I've been operating as a business coach. I didn't know I was operating as a business coach. My clients told me that in the 90s. I thought I was facilitating certain inquiries, which I was. So I make my living through liberating structures, most of which are of my own design. And the intent is to simply alleviate the suffering. So I work with a team or I work with an executive, and it's always all about creating an environment where rich exchanging is promoted.
So I think you have a little bit different view than the people who are coming like from the business background or from a technical background, etc. So to your experience, what is missing the most in the organizations? Like some skill or soft skill or something, like what is the thing which is missing the most?
What is missing the most is a leading indicator which lets us know that we are actually learning. And that we can use everywhere. So, I mean, I use this vitality metric. So if you just measure rich exchanges, you'll be fine. But in every organization, they like to have their own leading indicator. And that's all right. You can actually craft one. And once you have this leading indicator, it operates like the North Star. Everybody knows where they're going, and then the work belongs to the people who are doing it. So if you can use OKRs if you have the right environment. One of my colleagues, I'll put it in the chat, it's called Start Less, Finish More. Very good book on OKRs and the mindset that you need. But the point is, if you have a leading indicator, you can use it to sustain a learning environment because everybody's going after the same movement. So, you can go ahead, measure rich exchanges, take my tools, but also find something else that is relevant specifically for your organization.
Wim says it's scary to experience those rich exchanges at times. So, as they are quite emotional sometimes. And so can you elaborate on that a little bit? Is it best to put your finger on them, or is it okay to let them pass? Or what would you say about this?
Rich exchanging is vulnerable. That means it could be awkward. It could be messy. And I thought about making a slide of messy. I would actually say most of the good things in life are messy. So if you're going to mess around with rich exchanging, it's going to be messy. Think of a classroom where children are allowed to learn. Is it going to be messy? It will be. So we have to expect a mess. We have to expect vulnerability. And so in an environment of rich exchanging, then everybody can take care of everybody. And it's okay to be vulnerable because we're all vulnerable together. Now, people don't like that, but too bad. That's where we are. And if you think we're not vulnerable, I'm sorry, because you're going to find out that in fact we are. Always. So, yes, I do. I mean, I can show you more of my tools. I can't do it now, but if you want to see my tools, they are available. I will share them with you, how you actually use a vitality metric. The work of going from something that is general, such as my vitality metric, to something that is very specific, like the leading indicator for your organization at this time. This is an art form, and it can be done, it can be honed. I don't know how to do it quickly. It's an expensive consulting procedure as far as I know. I mean, I've done it many times, and I don't know how to make it quick and easy. But measuring vitality is quick and easy. This I can show you how to do very quickly.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let me put this. See if I can do this one more time.
Sure can.
There it is. One more
Just a
time.
few clicks on the right places on your screen, and you see it there.
So you start with something like this. This would be, we're pretending here that this is you, and you would make your own categories. These are just categories that I made up. Now, it's a little more challenging to do it in an organizational context. And so in the organizational context, I strongly recommend that you choose some project or some initiative that you care about. Let's just pick a silly example, which you will not be using, which is let's say more ice cream on Fridays. We want more ice cream on Fridays. In order to have more ice cream on Fridays, as you know, there will be other people involved. For example, probably vendors. Some sort of supplier will be involved in more ice cream on Fridays. Accounting might be involved. Someone has to pay for it. managers and staff, and so this is a ridiculous example that you would never use. But if you did, and then we started looking at all of the exchanging that has to happen in order for there to be more ice cream on Fridays. And then we would start to just estimate the percentage of rich exchange. This we do in groups. You don't do this alone. You do this at least in a trio, because your own thinking will, you will find your own thinking won't be clear enough. So if you do it in a trio, you'll get a much better score, much more accurate score. And this is just a finger in the air with your trio. Okay, there's 3 of us. We're working with the contractors who are bringing in ice cream. Roughly what percentage of that is rich? And you can just do it like that. One person says 35, one says 75. You get your heads together, you decide. And just go around your ecosystem and pick a few partners that are going to be necessary for your initiatives to succeed. And I'm sure it won't be about ice cream. You're likely to have advisors and strategic partners. You pick a few, use a chart like this. Now, what makes the chart work is that you have to know what percentage of your total exchanging you're looking at. So this is I'll explain this to you if you want to hear it. But if, for example, fellow students from other courses on that particular day were only 2% of my total exchanging, so they were pretty trivial, but I put them in there because 40% of those were rich. So that's a pretty high number. This was the organization I was speaking to that day, Women in Agile. And they were 50% of the total because they were occupying a lot of my day, and 75% of those exchanges were rich. So that's really a very high number, and it bumps up the total of some of these others. I only had 3% with clients that day, and 1% with strategic partners. And that's actually fairly realistic. If you look at any project, it's going to vary a great deal day by day. And so we do this every 3 weeks for 12 weeks. And at the end of 12 weeks, you have a very good ability to track the vitality against the task that the organization is measuring, or whatever else the organization is measuring, such as turnover, productivity, sales, new customers. You can compare the vitality metric with all of the metrics that you're already using for your projects. Because whatever project you're working on, there are some organizational metrics at play. So that's how you do it. And if you've done it once, it gets very easy. It looks difficult before you've done it. Does that take care of it? Zuzi, are you satisfied?
Yep. Thank you.
Perfect.
So I have another question for you. And that's, what is the most difficult moment you've been facing as a person through your life? What was the biggest learning?
For me personally?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think the one that I started with, that life is not about the tasks. It's about the interactions that make the tasks. The task is a byproduct.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that was huge.
What are you going to do with those organizations which are like task-oriented? They don't care about relationships. They say, no, results, metrics, etc.
Right.
And then they don't really listen to anything else. How you make them listen?
Well, they don't call me until they're in trouble. I'm a big disruption, and they won't call me unless they have already stumbled 4 or 5 times, so then they call me. And then I do something very much like what I just showed you. I will have a metric that I'm watching that, and it will be parallel to whatever metrics they're working on. So because they always have them, and so just by proving to them that my silly vitality metric somehow is somehow making their numbers look better, that's all they need to know. Now, ultimately, you are absolutely right. You are not going to change the culture by doing it that way. But what you will get is a small group of healthy human beings. And then that small group of healthy human beings has a funny way of turning into the top performing team in the organization. So I've done that at corporations whose names you know a number of times. But because because the fact of the matter is they are human beings and they are suffering. And if you take them away to ease their suffering, they will use it. I think one of the reasons the vitality metric works is that it doesn't make anybody wrong. You can't be wrong using the vitality metric. You make more, you have less, but you're not a better person or a smarter person or a more skilled person. It's just, here you go.
Great. That's interesting. What do you do with environments? Like I sometimes deal with teams like which lack trust completely. You speak about vulnerability, but if they're like no trust, completely dysfunctional team, where would you start?
I think I would probably start by asking them about their recent rich exchanges, because what happens when you do that is you trigger certain brain chemistry. When people share their rich exchanges with each other, it triggers certain brain, it's called co-regulation in biology. So you actually are using brain drugs. I use brain drugs in my work. I'm very aware that I use brain drugs. And I usually don't talk about that. But what happens when you have people introduce themselves with rich exchanging examples, real examples of, is they become, the brain chemistry is such that you actually get something called transformative belonging. And you're exactly right. It is scary. This is not something you want to mess with in a sloppy way. Because when you make people vulnerable, then they're vulnerable. You better be ready to take care of them. Somebody has a breakdown, you have to be there and make that breakdown usable by the group. And you know this, you're a facilitator. So, yeah, I think once I learned that my work was succeeding because I was using brain chemistry, I really kind of became invincible. Said, okay, well, you know what? I'm pretty sure that organization has human brains in it. No matter how much trouble they're in, they have human brains there. And those human brains are going to respond the way human brains respond. And so if I'm willing to go in and have people be angry at me, I mean, I've had people be very angry at me in the beginning. Who the hell are you? What do you know about cancer research? Nothing. I know this is what I know about cancer research. Nothing. I know a little bit about inquiry. So because I know these are human beings, I know that they're going to respond to it.
Wow. Where do you see the future of organizations? You entered this job. That was the beginning of your story because you want to change, the business, the work, the life of your parents. So where do you see the future of organizations 100 years from now?
I think you are creating the future of organizations. That 100 years from now, organizations will all be learning organizations. They won't be around if they're not learning organizations. So responsiveness, as you very well know, will be the currency. And, you know, we are all practitioners of responsiveness. That's why we're here. We really want people to have the power to respond. So the big shift that's going to happen in organizations is going to be a power shift. And if we all can remember to respect physiology, I think we'll be okay, because human physiology isn't going to change a lot in the next 100 years.
That's right. So, which leads us pretty much towards the end. What is the one thing you want people to remember from your talk?
Pay attention to your interactions.
Thank you very much. So pay attention to your interactions. We are pretty much at the end of Agile100.
Yes, pretty much at the end of the 3rd edition, or we are at the end of the 3rd edition. Very few things left. Thank you, first of all, Marsha, for doing this, for also closing.
Thank you very much.
With a great, I think, last sentence, with the last advice: pay attention to your interactions.